As the gentle evening light fades over the ancient temples and forgotten palaces where remarkable women once ruled with wisdom and strength, we begin tonight a peaceful journey into the hidden stories of history's most extraordinary female leaders, queens, empresses, and warrior rulers whose achievements were so threatening to later generations that their names were deliberately erased from chronicles and their monuments destroyed to silence their voices forever. Let your mind drift into the quiet corridors of power where these forgotten queens moved with grace and intelligence, wielding influence that shaped civilizations while navigating the complex world of ancient politics with skills that rivaled any male ruler. Close your eyes and feel the profound presence of women who understood that true power often flows not from force but from wisdom, diplomacy, and the patient art of building lasting legacies through cultural achievement and peaceful prosperity. Picture yourself walking through the moonlit ruins of ancient palaces where the whispered conversations of powerful women once echoed through marble halls, their voices carrying decisions that would affect millions of lives across vast empires and countless generations. These were not merely decorative consorts or symbolic figures, but genuine rulers who commanded armies, negotiated treaties, commissioned magnificent architecture, and governed with such effectiveness that their reigns became golden ages remembered for prosperity, artistic flowering, and cultural advancement that benefited both their subjects and neighboring civilizations. The systematic erasure of these remarkable women from historical records represents one of humanity's greatest losses of wisdom and inspiration, as later patriarchal societies found the memory of successful female leadership so threatening that they rewrote chronicles, destroyed statues, and eliminated references to queens who had proven that gender posed no barrier to exceptional leadership. The recovery of their stories through archaeological discovery and careful scholarly detective work reveals not only individual achievements but patterns of female governance that emphasized different values and approaches to power than those typically celebrated in male-dominated historical narratives. Hatshepsut of Egypt, whose peaceful 22-year reign brought unprecedented prosperity to the Nile Valley, was so successful that her stepson Thutmose III spent years after her death systematically destroying her monuments and chiseling her name from temple walls in desperate attempts to erase all memory of her effective leadership. Yet the beauty of her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari and the records hidden in forgotten papyri reveal a ruler who transformed Egypt through ambitious building projects, successful trade expeditions, and diplomatic innovations that avoided costly wars while expanding Egyptian influence throughout the ancient world. The mysterious Nefertiti, whose name means the beautiful one has come, may have ruled Egypt independently after the death of her husband Akhenaten, governing during one of history's most revolutionary periods when monotheistic religion challenged traditional polytheism, while artistic styles evolved toward unprecedented realism and emotional expression. Her stunning bust, discovered in a sculptor's workshop, captures not merely physical beauty but the intelligent gaze of a woman who navigated religious upheaval and political crisis with skills that enabled her to maintain power in a world where female authority faced constant challenge. Watch as Zenobia of Palmyra emerges from the Syrian desert to create an empire that stretched from Turkey to Egypt, challenging Roman dominance through military brilliance combined with cultural sophistication that made her capital a center of learning where Greek philosophy, Persian literature, and Arabian wisdom converged in an atmosphere of intellectual freedom. Her court welcomed scholars, poets, and artists from throughout the known world, while her armies demonstrated that tactical innovation could triumph over superior numbers when led by commanders who understood both strategy and the psychology of warfare. Amanirenas, the one-eyed queen of Nubia, proved that courage and determination could defeat even Roman legions when her forces not only repelled invasion but launched counterattacks that forced Augustus Caesar himself to negotiate a peace treaty that recognized Nubian independence and established favorable terms that lasted for generations. Archaeological evidence from her kingdom reveals a sophisticated civilization that combined traditional African governance with Hellenistic cultural influences while maintaining economic prosperity through gold mining and trade networks that connected sub-Saharan Africa to Mediterranean markets. Wu Zetian of China, the only woman in Chinese history to claim the title of emperor rather than accepting the lesser designation of empress, demonstrated that political intelligence and administrative competence could overcome even the most deeply entrenched cultural prejudices against female leadership. Her reign brought stability and prosperity to the Tang dynasty while establishing examination systems and governmental reforms that would influence Chinese administration for centuries, proving that effective governance depended on ability rather than gender when rulers possessed the wisdom to surround themselves with competent advisors and the courage to make difficult decisions for the long-term benefit of their subjects. The pattern that emerges from studying these forgotten queens reveals approaches to leadership that emphasized different values than those typically associated with ancient rulership: diplomatic solutions over military conquest, cultural development over territorial expansion, and sustainable prosperity over short-term glory. These women understood that lasting power came not from fear and dominance but from earning genuine loyalty through policies that improved the lives of their subjects while creating beautiful environments that inspired pride and cultural identity. The artistic achievements sponsored by female rulers often reflected their understanding that cultural development provided more lasting foundations for political power than military victories that could be reversed by subsequent defeats. Hatshepsut's temple architecture influenced Egyptian building for centuries, while Zenobia's patronage of literature and philosophy established intellectual traditions that outlasted her political empire. These queens recognized that the monuments they commissioned would speak across time about values and achievements that transcended the temporary nature of political authority. The diplomatic innovations pioneered by many forgotten queens reflect their understanding that negotiation and alliance building often achieved more lasting results than conquest and occupation. Their correspondence with foreign rulers, preserved in diplomatic archives, reveals sophisticated understanding of international relations and economic networks that enabled smaller kingdoms to maintain independence while participating in broader cultural and commercial exchanges that benefited all participants. The religious and spiritual innovations associated with several forgotten queens suggest that women's leadership often brought different perspectives to questions of meaning, purpose, and community values. Nefertiti's involvement in religious reforms, Wu Zetian's patronage of Buddhist temples, and various queens' roles in establishing festivals and ceremonies that celebrated life and abundance rather than war and domination demonstrate alternative approaches to spiritual leadership that emphasized healing and harmony rather than conquest and submission. The economic policies implemented by many female rulers reflected understanding that sustainable prosperity required attention to agricultural development, craft production, and trade networks rather than relying primarily on tribute and plunder from military campaigns. Archaeological evidence from kingdoms ruled by women often reveals evidence of technological innovation, artistic flourishing, and improved living standards that suggest these rulers understood governance as stewardship rather than exploitation. The educational and cultural institutions established by forgotten queens often outlasted their political achievements, creating libraries, schools, and artistic workshops that preserved and transmitted knowledge across generations while fostering creativity and intellectual development that benefited entire civilizations. Their understanding that power could be multiplied through education and cultural development rather than merely concentrated through military dominance demonstrates sophisticated appreciation for the sources of lasting influence and historical significance. The international recognition that several forgotten queens achieved during their lifetimes demonstrates that their contemporaries, including male rulers and foreign diplomats, acknowledged their competence and respected their authority even in cultures that theoretically excluded women from political leadership. The diplomatic gifts, treaty negotiations, and cultural exchanges that characterized their reigns reveal networks of mutual respect that transcended gender expectations when individual ability and achievement proved undeniable. The mystery surrounding the deliberate erasure of these remarkable women from historical records reflects the perceived threat that their successful examples posed to later generations who preferred to believe that political leadership required masculine qualities and that female authority represented dangerous departures from natural order. The archaeological rediscovery of their achievements demonstrates how material evidence can sometimes preserve truth that written records attempted to suppress. The contemporary relevance of these forgotten queens extends far beyond historical curiosity to provide alternative models of leadership that emphasize collaboration over competition, sustainable development over short-term exploitation, and cultural achievement over military dominance. Their examples demonstrate approaches to governance that remain relevant to modern challenges requiring diplomatic solutions, environmental stewardship, and inclusive policies that benefit diverse populations. As we begin our exploration of these remarkable women whose stories were hidden for centuries, we embark on a journey not just through ancient history but through alternative visions of power, leadership, and human possibility that challenge assumptions about gender, authority, and the sources of lasting achievement. These forgotten queens remind us that history has always included examples of female excellence and wisdom, even when later generations chose to ignore or suppress evidence that contradicted their preferred narratives about natural hierarchy and inevitable dominance. The gentle moonlight that illuminates the ruins of their palaces tonight reveals the same stone and gold that once reflected the intelligence and dignity of women who proved that leadership excellence knows no gender boundaries. While their whispered stories continue inspiring contemporary audiences to question whose voices have been silenced and what wisdom has been lost through the systematic erasure of female achievement from historical memory. As the gentle morning light touches the rose-colored sandstone of ancient Thebes, we journey tonight into the remarkable world of Hatshepsut, Egypt's most successful female pharaoh, whose 22-year reign brought unprecedented peace and prosperity to the land of the Nile while challenging every assumption about women and power in the ancient world. Let your mind drift across the golden desert sands to the magnificent temple she built at Deir el-Bahari, where terraced gardens once bloomed with frankincense trees and exotic plants brought from distant lands through diplomatic trade rather than military conquest. Close your eyes and feel the quiet strength of a ruler who proved that wisdom, patience, and cultural achievement could create more lasting legacies than any warrior's victories. Picture yourself standing in the cool shadows of Hatshepsut's mortuary temple as dawn breaks over the Valley of the Kings, where the morning breeze carries the scent of desert flowers and the whispered stories of a woman who dared to wear the false beard of Pharaoh while governing Egypt with unprecedented skill and vision. This architectural masterpiece, rising in elegant terraces from the desert floor to nestle against towering limestone cliffs, represents not just individual achievement but a revolutionary approach to royal commemoration that emphasized harmony with natural landscapes rather than domination over them. Born around 1507 BCE into the royal family of the 18th dynasty, Hatshepsut entered a world where women wielded significant behind-the-scenes influence but were never expected to claim supreme political authority for themselves. Her father, Thutmose I, had expanded Egyptian territory through military campaigns, while her mother, Queen Ahmose, represented the powerful maternal lineages that legitimized pharaonic rule. The young princess received an education befitting her royal status, learning to read and write hieroglyphs, understand religious ceremonies, and navigate the complex relationships between Egypt's powerful priesthoods and noble families. The path to unprecedented power began when Hatshepsut married her half-brother Thutmose II, continuing the royal custom of sibling marriage designed to keep bloodlines pure and concentrate divine authority within the royal family. This union, while politically necessary, proved personally challenging as Thutmose II suffered from poor health that limited his ability to govern effectively. Hatshepsut gradually assumed increasing responsibility for day-to-day administration, gaining experience in the practical arts of rulership while maintaining the ceremonial roles expected of a queen. Watch as the death of Thutmose II around 1479 BCE creates the succession crisis that would transform Hatshepsut from influential queen to unprecedented pharaoh. The legitimate male heir, Thutmose III, was still a young child, creating the need for a regent who could maintain stability during the vulnerable transition period. Rather than serving as a temporary placeholder until the young pharaoh came of age, Hatshepsut made the revolutionary decision to claim full pharaonic authority for herself, adopting the complete regalia and titles of kingship, including the artificial beard that symbolized divine rulership. The transformation from woman to pharaoh required careful navigation of religious, political, and cultural obstacles that had never before been encountered in Egyptian history. Hatshepsut worked closely with powerful priests and scribes to develop theological justifications for her unprecedented rule, claiming direct divine appointment by the god Amun and commissioning artwork that depicted her birth as the result of divine intervention. These religious innovations created new precedents for female authority while maintaining continuity with traditional concepts of pharaonic legitimacy. The early years of Hatshepsut's reign demonstrate the diplomatic and administrative skills that would characterize her entire rule, as she focused on internal development and peaceful foreign relations rather than the military campaigns that had characterized previous pharaohs. Her court attracted talented architects, artists, and administrators who shared her vision of achieving greatness through cultural achievement and economic prosperity rather than territorial conquest. The stability she created enabled unprecedented artistic flowering and architectural innovation that would influence Egyptian civilization for centuries. The famous trading expeditions to the mysterious land of Punt represent perhaps the most celebrated achievement of Hatshepsut's peaceful foreign policy, demonstrating how diplomatic and commercial relationships could achieve more lasting benefits than military conquest. These carefully planned voyages, launched around 1458 BCE, brought back exotic goods including frankincense, myrrh, gold, ivory, and live animals that enriched Egyptian culture while establishing trade relationships that would persist for generations. The detailed reliefs depicting these expeditions emphasize cooperation and mutual benefit rather than domination and exploitation. The architectural program that Hatshepsut commissioned throughout Egypt reflects her understanding that monumental building projects could serve multiple purposes, providing employment for craftsmen and laborers, demonstrating pharaonic power and divine favor, and creating lasting monuments that would preserve her memory and achievements for future generations. Her projects emphasized beauty, harmony, and integration with natural landscapes rather than the intimidating scale that characterized many royal monuments, creating sacred spaces that invited contemplation and spiritual reflection. The relationship between Hatshepsut and her stepson Thutmose III remains one of the most intriguing aspects of her reign, as modern scholarship has revealed that the two rulers may have shared power more cooperatively than previously believed. Rather than the bitter rivalry described by some ancient sources, archaeological evidence suggests that Thutmose III gained military experience through campaigns in Nubia and the Levant, while Hatshepsut focused on internal administration and diplomatic relations. This division of responsibilities may have enabled both rulers to develop their particular strengths while maintaining stability throughout the kingdom. The artistic innovations sponsored by Hatshepsut's court established new standards of elegance and sophistication that influenced Egyptian art for centuries, with sculptures and paintings that emphasized grace, beauty, and spiritual serenity rather than the martial vigor typically associated with pharaonic imagery. The workshops she patronized produced masterpieces of craftsmanship in gold, silver, precious stones, and fine textiles that demonstrated Egypt's wealth and cultural sophistication while providing luxury goods that enhanced diplomatic relationships with foreign courts. The religious policies implemented during Hatshepsut's reign demonstrate her deep understanding of the spiritual foundations of pharaonic authority and her skill in working with Egypt's powerful priesthoods to maintain religious stability while introducing innovations that supported her unprecedented position. She commissioned new temples, restored ancient shrines, and sponsored religious festivals that reinforced traditional values while subtly expanding concepts of divine authority to encompass female rule. These religious innovations created theological frameworks that could support her legitimacy without disrupting established spiritual practices. The economic prosperity that characterized Hatshepsut's reign resulted from her focus on developing Egypt's agricultural resources, expanding trade networks, and investing in infrastructure projects that improved transportation and communication throughout the kingdom. The Nile Valley flourished under her careful stewardship, with archaeological evidence revealing increased agricultural productivity, thriving markets, and improved living standards for ordinary Egyptians. This domestic prosperity provided the foundation for the cultural achievements and diplomatic successes that defined her rule. The systematic attempt to erase Hatshepsut from historical memory began during the later reign of Thutmose III and continued under subsequent pharaohs, who found the precedent of successful female rule threatening to traditional concepts of royal authority. Her name was chiseled from monuments, her images were defaced or recarved to represent male pharaohs, and official king lists omitted her reign entirely. This deliberate destruction of evidence nearly succeeded in erasing one of Egypt's most successful rulers from historical memory, demonstrating how thoroughly political authorities could manipulate historical records when they found certain precedents inconvenient. The rediscovery of Hatshepsut's achievements through modern archaeology represents one of Egyptology's greatest success stories, as patient scholars have pieced together fragments of evidence to reconstruct the story of her remarkable reign. The careful excavation of her mortuary temple, the analysis of damaged inscriptions, and the identification of artifacts bearing her cartouche have gradually revealed the scope of her achievements while demonstrating the sophisticated techniques used to attempt her historical erasure. The international influence of Hatshepsut's diplomatic innovations extended far beyond Egypt to affect relationships throughout the ancient Near East, as her emphasis on trade and cultural exchange rather than military domination created new models for international relations. The stability and prosperity of Egypt during her reign attracted foreign diplomats, merchants, and scholars who carried Egyptian cultural influences back to their homelands while bringing new ideas and technologies that enriched Egyptian civilization. The legacy of Hatshepsut's architectural achievements continues to inspire contemporary architects and urban planners, who find in her projects examples of sustainable design that harmonized human construction with natural environments. Her temple at Deir el-Bahari, with its terraced gardens and careful integration with the cliff face, demonstrates principles of environmental sensitivity and aesthetic harmony that remain relevant to contemporary discussions about sustainable development and respectful interaction with natural landscapes. As we contemplate the extraordinary life and achievements of this remarkable woman, we witness the power of vision, patience, and diplomatic skill to create lasting cultural achievements that transcend the temporary nature of political authority. Hatshepsut's reign reminds us that true greatness often lies not in conquest and domination, but in the ability to create peace, prosperity, and beauty that enriches human civilization while demonstrating that leadership excellence knows no gender boundaries when individuals possess the wisdom and courage to pursue their highest potential. The gentle desert winds that whisper through the ruins of her temples continue carrying the story of a woman who proved that strength comes in many forms, and that the most enduring monuments are built not through force but through the patient accumulation of wisdom, artistic vision, and genuine care for the welfare of those who trust their leaders to guide them toward prosperity and peace. As the gentle evening light casts long shadows across the ancient city of Aketon, we step tonight into the mysterious world of Nefertiti, Egypt's most enigmatic queen, whose legendary beauty has captivated humanity for over 3 millennia, while her true story remains shrouded in the golden mysteries of one of history's most revolutionary periods. Let your mind drift along the sacred Nile to the ruins of her magnificent capital, where revolutionary art flourished under desert stars, and a queen whose name means the beautiful one has come may have wielded power far greater than any woman before her time. Close your eyes and feel the quiet dignity of a ruler who navigated religious upheaval and political transformation with grace that transformed not only Egypt but our understanding of ancient queenship itself. Picture yourself walking through the peaceful ruins of Aketon at twilight, where the remnants of Nefertiti's palace still whisper stories of a queen who dared to stand as equal partner to Pharaoh Akhenaten during Egypt's most dramatic religious revolution, when the worship of many gods gave way to devotion to a single solar deity whose light was said to shine through both the royal couple's divine authority. The limestone reliefs that survive from this extraordinary period show Nefertiti not as a submissive consort but as an active participant in religious ceremonies, political decisions, and the daily governance of an empire undergoing unprecedented transformation. Born around 1370 BCE, possibly as Nefertiti Nefertiti, this remarkable woman emerged from origins that remain tantalizingly mysterious, with scholars debating whether she was born a commoner who rose through exceptional beauty and intelligence, or a foreign princess whose marriage to the future Akhenaten sealed important diplomatic alliances. What remains certain is that by the time she became queen around 1353 BCE, she possessed not only the physical beauty celebrated in countless artistic representations, but also the political acumen and spiritual conviction necessary to serve as partner in one of history's most ambitious attempts to transform religious and cultural traditions. The early years of Nefertiti's queenship coincided with her husband's gradual embrace of Atenism, the revolutionary monotheistic religion that would define their joint reign and challenge every aspect of traditional Egyptian spiritual life. Rather than merely supporting her husband's religious innovations, archaeological evidence suggests that Nefertiti played an active role in developing and promoting the new faith, appearing prominently in temple reliefs where she performs religious ceremonies typically reserved for pharaohs while demonstrating theological knowledge that suggests deep personal commitment to the revolutionary spiritual principles. Watch as the royal couple makes the momentous decision to abandon Thebes and create an entirely new capital city dedicated to their revolutionary god, moving the court and government to Akhenaten, modern-day Amarna, where they could implement their religious and artistic visions without interference from the powerful traditional priesthoods that dominated Egypt's ancient spiritual centers. This massive undertaking required unprecedented organizational skills, diplomatic finesse, and unwavering conviction that their new approach to governance and spirituality would benefit both Egypt and the world beyond. The artistic revolution that flourished under Nefertiti's patronage represents one of history's most dramatic departures from established aesthetic traditions, as the formal, idealized style that had characterized Egyptian art for over a millennium gave way to revolutionary naturalism that emphasized individual humanity, emotional expression, and intimate family relationships. The famous limestone bust discovered in sculptor Thutmose's workshop captures not merely Nefertiti's legendary physical beauty, but the intelligent gaze and confident bearing of a woman who understood her own worth and authority in ways that transcended conventional expectations for royal consorts. The domestic scenes depicted throughout Akhenaten reveal a royal family that prioritized personal relationships and emotional intimacy in ways that challenged traditional concepts of pharaonic dignity and divine authority. Reliefs showing Nefertiti and Akhenaten playing with their 6 daughters, sharing meals, and participating in informal activities demonstrate alternative approaches to royal representation that emphasized humanity and accessibility rather than intimidating divine remoteness. These innovations in royal imagery reflected deeper changes in concepts of leadership and authority that would influence Egyptian culture for generations. The mystery that surrounds Nefertiti's later years has generated scholarly debate that continues to evolve as new archaeological evidence emerges from ongoing excavations at Amarna and other sites associated with the Amarna period. Some theories suggest that she may have ruled independently as pharaoh after Akhenaten's death, either under her own name or using the throne name Neferneferuaten, governing Egypt during the crucial transition period before the young Tutankhamun ascended to power and initiated the restoration of traditional religious practices. The evidence supporting Nefertiti's possible independent rule includes references to a shadowy pharaoh named Neferneferuaten who appears in official records between Akhenaten's death and Tutankhamun's coronation, diplomatic correspondence that suggests continued Egyptian diplomatic activity during this transitional period, and archaeological findings that indicate ongoing construction and administrative activities at Amarna that would have required pharaonic authority to authorize and fund. If these theories prove correct, Nefertiti may have been one of Egypt's most successful female pharaohs, governing during one of the most challenging periods in Egyptian history. The diplomatic challenges that faced Egypt during Nefertiti's queenship required sophisticated understanding of international relations and the ability to maintain crucial alliances while implementing domestic reforms that challenged traditional practices. The Amarna letters, diplomatic correspondence discovered at Akhenaten, reveal complex negotiations with foreign rulers who needed reassurance that Egypt's religious innovations would not affect existing treaties and trade relationships. Nefertiti's involvement in these diplomatic activities suggests political skills that extended far beyond ceremonial queenly duties. The religious innovations that Nefertiti helped champion represent some of history's earliest experiments with monotheistic worship, anticipating by centuries the religious developments that would reshape the ancient world through Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The emphasis on direct divine revelation, personal spiritual experience, and the rejection of traditional priestly mediation created new possibilities for individual religious expression, while challenging established hierarchies that had dominated Egyptian spirituality for thousands of years. The architectural legacy of Nefertiti's reign includes not only the magnificent city of Akhenaten, but also innovative approaches to temple design and urban planning that emphasized openness, natural light, and integration with landscape features in ways that reflected the solar theology central to Atenist belief. The temples built during her queenship abandoned the dark, mysterious interior spaces traditional to Egyptian religious architecture in favor of open courtyards and sun-drenched spaces that enabled worshippers to experience direct contact with divine light and energy. The artistic workshops that flourished under Nefertiti's patronage attracted talented craftsmen from throughout Egypt and beyond, creating a cultural renaissance that produced some of ancient Egypt's most beautiful and technically sophisticated artworks. The sculptures, paintings, and decorative objects created during the Amarna period demonstrate technical mastery combined with innovative aesthetic vision that influenced Egyptian artistic traditions long after the capital's abandonment and the restoration of traditional religious practices. The family dynamics that characterized Nefertiti's household provide fascinating insights into royal life during one of Egypt's most transformative periods, with evidence suggesting that she and Akhenaten created domestic environments that prioritized emotional intimacy and shared parenting responsibilities in ways that challenged conventional expectations for pharaonic families. The apparent genuine affection between the royal couple, documented in countless artistic representations, suggests that their partnership encompassed both political collaboration and personal devotion. The decline of Amarna and the eventual abandonment of Atenism represent one of history's most dramatic religious reversals, as the revolutionary monotheistic experiment that had dominated Egyptian spiritual life for nearly 2 decades was systematically dismantled by subsequent pharaohs who restored traditional polytheistic practices while attempting to erase all memory of the Amarna period. The speed and thoroughness of this restoration suggest that Atenism, despite royal patronage, had failed to gain widespread acceptance among ordinary Egyptians who preferred familiar religious traditions. The mystery surrounding Nefertiti's final years and ultimate fate continues to intrigue scholars and capture popular imagination, with theories ranging from her possible rule as an independent pharaoh to speculation about exile, murder, or natural death during the chaotic transition period that followed Akhenaten's demise. Recent archaeological discoveries, including the possible identification of her mummy, continue to generate new theories and debates that may eventually resolve questions that have puzzled Egyptologists for over a century. The international influence of Nefertiti's legacy extends far beyond academic Egyptology to encompass contemporary discussions about female leadership, artistic innovation, and religious freedom that demonstrate the continuing relevance of issues that concerned this remarkable queen over 3 millennia ago. Her story resonates with modern audiences who recognize in her experience universal themes of ambition, creativity, and the challenges faced by individuals who dare to challenge established traditions and conventional expectations. The conservation efforts that currently protect Nefertiti's artistic legacy, including her famous bust housed in Berlin's News Museum, reflect international recognition of her significance as both historical figure and cultural icon whose beauty and mystery continue, inspiring artists, writers, and filmmakers who find in her story timeless themes of power, love, ambition, and the eternal human search for meaning and transcendence. As we contemplate the enigmatic legacy of this extraordinary queen, we witness the power of individual vision and courage to transform entire civilizations while demonstrating that true beauty encompasses not merely physical attributes but intelligence, conviction, and the strength to pursue revolutionary ideals despite opposition from established authorities and conventional wisdom. Nefertiti's story reminds us that history's most fascinating figures often remain partially mysterious, inviting each generation to rediscover their achievements while finding new relevance in their struggles and accomplishments. The gentle desert winds that blow across the ruins of Akhenaten continue carrying whispers of a queen whose beauty inspired artists across millennia, while her political achievements and spiritual convictions demonstrate that true power emerges from the courage to embrace transformation and the wisdom to lead others toward new possibilities for human flourishing and cultural achievement. As the gentle evening stars begin to shimmer over the ancient ruins of Palmyra, we journey tonight into the extraordinary world of Queen Zenobia, the brilliant desert ruler who dared to challenge the mighty Roman Empire at the height of its power, creating an independent kingdom that stretched from Turkey to Egypt through diplomatic genius, military strategy, and cultural vision that transformed her oasis city into one of the ancient world's most magnificent centers of learning and trade. Let your mind drift across the golden sand dunes to her marble palaces, where Greek philosophy blended with Persian wisdom while Arabian poetry echoed through columned halls filled with scholars from every corner of the known world. Close your eyes and feel the quiet strength of a woman who proved that intelligence and courage could triumph over overwhelming odds, at least for a brief, shining moment in history. Picture yourself walking through the moonlit colonnades of ancient Palmyra around 267 CE, where the desert breeze carries the scent of frankincense and spices from distant lands, while the gentle sound of fountains mingles with the whispered conversations of merchants, diplomats, and intellectuals who have traveled thousands of miles to participate in the cultural renaissance flourishing under Zenobia's enlightened rule. This magnificent oasis city, strategically positioned along the Silk Road connecting East and West, had become far more than a mere trading post. It was a cosmopolitan center where diverse civilizations met in peaceful exchange of goods, ideas, and artistic traditions. Born around 240 CE with the Arabic name Al-Zaba, meaning hairy one, The future queen entered a world where the powerful caravan city of Palmyra had achieved remarkable prosperity through its unique position as intermediary between the Roman Empire and the Persian kingdoms, Chinese silk routes, and Indian spice traders. Her noble Palmyrene family possessed both Roman citizenship and connections to local Bedouin tribes, enabling young Zenobia to receive an education that encompassed Greek literature, Roman law, Egyptian history, and the practical skills necessary for governing a multicultural trading empire. The path to power began when Zenobia married Oderenethus, the Roman-appointed ruler of Palmyra who had achieved unprecedented authority by defending Rome's eastern territories against Persian invasions while maintaining the delicate balance between Roman loyalty and Palmyrene independence. Their partnership represented more than mere political alliance. It was an intellectual collaboration between two brilliant individuals who shared visions of creating a truly cosmopolitan civilization that could synthesize the best elements of Greek, Roman, Persian, and Arabian cultures. Watch as the assassination of Oderenethus in 267 CE transforms Zenobia from influential queen to sole ruler of a kingdom facing existential threats from multiple directions, with Persian armies pressing from the east, Arab tribes challenging Palmyrene authority from the south, and Roman officials questioning the loyalty of a grieving widow who possessed both the intelligence and determination to maintain her husband's legacy while pursuing even more ambitious goals. Rather than seeking protection through submission to Roman authority, Zenobia chose the dangerous path of asserting complete independence while expanding Palmyrene territory through military campaigns that demonstrated her strategic genius. The military campaigns that established Zenobia's reputation as one of history's most formidable female commanders began with defensive actions that protected Palmyrene trade routes and territorial integrity, but gradually evolved into offensive operations that captured Roman territories throughout Syria, Palestine, and eventually Egypt itself. These victories were achieved not through overwhelming force but through tactical innovation, diplomatic preparation, and careful attention to local populations who welcomed Palmyrene rule as preferable to Roman taxation and administrative inefficiency. The conquest of Egypt represents perhaps Zenobia's greatest military and diplomatic triumph, as her forces not only defeated Roman armies but gained the support of Egyptian priests, merchants, and common people who appreciated her respect for local customs and religious traditions. Unlike typical conquerors who imposed foreign practices and extracted tribute, Zenobia governed her expanded territories through inclusive policies that honored existing institutions while providing more efficient administration and greater economic opportunities for local populations. The cultural flowering that occurred throughout Zenobia's empire reflects her understanding that lasting political authority required more than military success. It demanded the creation of intellectual and artistic environments that could inspire loyalty through genuine improvement in the quality of life for all subjects. Her court at Palmyra attracted philosophers, historians, poets, and scientists from Greece, Rome, Persia, India, and China, creating unprecedented opportunities for cross-cultural learning and intellectual synthesis that produced new forms of art, literature, and scientific knowledge. The queen's personal intellectual achievements were legendary even among her contemporaries, with ancient sources crediting her with fluency in Greek, Latin, Aramaic, and Egyptian, while noting her deep knowledge of Homer's poetry, Plato's philosophy, and the historical works of earlier scholars. This remarkable education enabled her to engage as intellectual equal with the greatest minds of her age, while providing the cultural foundation necessary for governing diverse populations, whose loyalty depended on respected leadership rather than mere military dominance. The diplomatic innovations that Zenobia employed in managing her expanding empire demonstrated sophisticated understanding of international relations and the complex balance of power that characterized the 3rd century Mediterranean world. Rather than simply challenging Rome through military confrontation, she pursued policies designed to create alternative power structures that could provide security and prosperity for Eastern Mediterranean peoples without requiring complete submission to Roman authority and cultural assimilation. The economic policies implemented throughout Zenobia's territories reflected her appreciation for the commercial foundations of Palmyrene prosperity and her understanding that political independence required economic self-sufficiency combined with profitable trade relationships that could fund military forces while providing incentives for local populations to support her rule. The expansion of trade networks, improvement of transportation infrastructure, and establishment of new manufacturing centers created prosperity that contrasted favorably with the economic difficulties affecting other parts of the Roman Empire. The religious tolerance that characterized Zenobia's governance attracted support from diverse populations, whose spiritual traditions had often been suppressed or marginalized under Roman rule, while her personal devotion to the sun god Sol Invictus provided theological framework for inclusive policies that honored both traditional Palmyrene beliefs and the various religious practices of subject populations. This approach to religious diversity created stability in regions that had previously experienced conflict over competing spiritual authorities and practices. The eventual confrontation with Roman Emperor Aurelian was inevitable once Zenobia's successes began threatening fundamental Roman interests in Eastern Mediterranean territories whose agricultural production, tax revenue, and strategic location were essential for imperial survival. The military campaigns that pitted Zenobia's forces against Roman legions represented more than territorial disputes. They were contests between different visions of how diverse populations could be governed and how political authority could be legitimized in an interconnected world. The siege of Palmyra in 272 CE marked the climactic confrontation between Zenobia's vision of independent Eastern Mediterranean civilization and Roman determination to maintain imperial unity through centralized control, with both sides understanding that defeat would mean not just military disaster but the end of alternative approaches to governance that had been developing throughout the region. The ultimate Roman victory resulted not from superior tactics but from overwhelming resources and the ability to sustain prolonged military operations that smaller kingdoms could not match. The capture of Zenobia and her subsequent fate remain subjects of historical debate, with various ancient sources providing conflicting accounts of whether she died during the siege, committed suicide to avoid capture, or was taken to Rome, where she either was executed or lived in comfortable exile. These uncertainties reflect both the limitations of ancient historical records and the mythic status that Zenobia achieved even among her enemies, who recognized her remarkable achievements while celebrating her defeat as confirmation of Roman superiority. The destruction of Palmyra and the systematic elimination of Zenobia's political innovations represent one of history's great cultural disasters, as the cosmopolitan civilization she had created disappeared along with the libraries, schools, and artistic workshops that had made her capital a center of learning and cultural exchange. The speed and thoroughness of this destruction demonstrate Roman understanding that Zenobia's example posed fundamental challenges to imperial ideology that required complete elimination rather than mere military defeat. The legacy of Zenobia's achievements extends far beyond her political and military accomplishments to encompass alternative models of leadership that emphasized cultural synthesis, religious tolerance, and economic development rather than conquest and domination as foundations. For political authority, her brief success in creating an independent Eastern Mediterranean kingdom demonstrated possibilities for governance that inspired later generations of leaders who sought to balance local autonomy with broader political and economic integration. The contemporary relevance of Zenobia's story resonates with modern discussions about cultural diversity, international cooperation, and the challenges faced by smaller nations seeking to maintain independence while participating in global economic and political systems dominated by major powers. Her approach to governing diverse populations through inclusive policies and respect for local traditions provides models for contemporary leaders addressing similar challenges in multicultural societies and international relations. As we contemplate the remarkable achievements of this extraordinary queen, we witness the power of vision, intelligence, and courage to create alternative possibilities for human civilization, while demonstrating that true greatness often lies not in ultimate victory, but in the willingness to pursue noble goals despite overwhelming odds. Zenobia's legacy reminds us that history's most inspiring figures are often those who dared to imagine better ways of organizing human societies and who possessed the strength to pursue their ideals even when success seemed impossible. The gentle desert winds that blow across the ruins of Palmyra continue carrying whispers of a queen who proved that wisdom and determination could challenge the mightiest empires while creating, however briefly, visions of cosmopolitan civilization that honored diversity, encouraged learning, and demonstrated that political authority could be based on cultural achievement rather than military dominance alone. As the gentle evening stars reflect upon the ancient waters of the Nile far above the first cataract, we journey tonight into the remarkable world of Queen Amanirenas, the fierce and wise ruler of Nubia whose courage in defending her kingdom against the mighty Roman Empire earned her the title Candake, the sacred name for ruling queens in the land of Kush. Let your mind drift southward along the life-giving river to the golden city of Meroe, where a woman of extraordinary strength and diplomatic skill proved that even the greatest imperial powers must respect those who fight with both valor and wisdom for their people's freedom. Close your eyes and feel the quiet dignity of a queen who lost an eye in battle but never lost sight of her duty to protect the independence and prosperity of her beloved homeland. Picture yourself standing in the peaceful royal gardens of Meroe around 25 BCE, where the morning breeze carries the scent of exotic flowers and the distant sound of craftsmen working gold and iron in workshops that made this Nubian capital one of Africa's wealthiest and most sophisticated cities. Queen Amanirenas walks among the fountains and date palms with the measured pace of a ruler who has learned that true strength comes not from rushing into conflict but from patient preparation, careful strategy, and unwavering commitment to principles that transcend individual ambition to serve the lasting welfare of her subjects. Born into the royal line of Kush sometime between 60 and 50 BCE, Amanirenas inherited not only a throne but a proud tradition of female leadership that had characterized Nubian civilization for over 3 millennia. The Kandakes who had ruled before her were legendary figures whose wisdom and courage had guided their people through centuries of change while maintaining the cultural identity and political independence that made Nubia unique among ancient African kingdoms. This matrilineal tradition of queenship provided Amanirenas with both legitimacy and responsibility that she would carry with exceptional grace and effectiveness. The kingdom of Kush that Amanirenas ruled from her throne in Meroe represented one of ancient Africa's greatest civilizations, with wealth derived from gold mines, iron production, and control of trade routes that connected sub-Saharan Africa to the Mediterranean world. The capital city's prosperity supported not only luxurious royal palaces but also temples, schools, and workshops where skilled artisans created beautiful objects that demonstrated Nubian cultural sophistication while providing trade goods that enriched the entire kingdom through commercial relationships with Egypt, Arabia, and lands beyond. Watch as the death of her husband King Tirytakes around 25 BCE elevates Amanirenas from influential queen consort to sovereign ruler of a kingdom facing unprecedented external threats, as Roman forces under Emperor Augustus complete their conquest of Egypt and begin casting covetous eyes toward the wealthy Nubian territories that control access to African gold, ivory, and exotic goods that Roman merchants desire for their expanding markets. The transition from shared to sole authority tests every aspect of Amanirenas' political skill and personal courage, as she must quickly establish her legitimacy while preparing for conflicts that will determine her kingdom's survival. The initial Roman provocations that sparked the Great War between Nubia and Rome began with attempts to impose taxation on lower Nubian territories that had traditionally maintained independence while participating in mutually beneficial trade relationships with Egypt. These economic demands represented more than mere revenue collection. They constituted fundamental challenges to Nubian sovereignty that threatened to transform proud independent peoples into tributary subjects of a foreign empire whose cultural values and administrative practices conflicted with traditional African governance systems. The military preparations that Amanirenas undertook in response to Roman encroachment demonstrate her understanding that successful resistance required more than courage and determination. It demanded careful organization, strategic planning, and the ability to inspire diverse populations to unite in defense of shared values and common interests. Her army of nearly 30,000 soldiers included not only professional warriors but also citizen soldiers drawn from farming communities, trading centers, and craft guilds whose participation reflected broad popular support for her leadership and policies. The initial Nubian victories against Roman forces reveal Amanirenas as a military commander of exceptional skill who understood that smaller armies could defeat larger ones through superior knowledge of local terrain, better relationships with civilian populations, and tactical flexibility that enabled rapid movement and surprise attacks. The capture of Roman-occupied cities in Lower Nubia provided not only strategic advantages but also symbolic victories that demonstrated Nubian capacity to challenge imperial authority while offering alternative models of governance that respected local traditions and individual dignity. The personal courage that Amanirenas displayed throughout the conflict earned her the respect even of enemies who recognized her willingness to lead from the front rather than directing battles from safe distances. The wound that cost her an eye and earned her the epithet the One-Eyed Queen was sustained during active combat where she fought alongside her soldiers rather than remaining in protected command positions, demonstrating leadership principles that inspired maximum loyalty and effort from troops who knew their queen shared every danger and hardship. The Roman retaliation that followed Nubian victories brought the full weight of imperial military power against Amanirenas' kingdom, with forces that destroyed cities, enslaved populations, and temporarily occupied much of Lower Nubia in campaigns designed to demonstrate the futility of resistance and the inevitable consequences of challenging Roman authority. Yet rather than surrendering in the face of overwhelming odds, Amanirenas adapted her strategy to emphasize guerrilla warfare, diplomatic negotiation, and economic pressure that gradually convinced Roman commanders that the costs of occupation exceeded potential benefits. The peace negotiations that eventually ended the conflict demonstrate Amanirenas' diplomatic skills and her understanding that successful resistance sometimes requires knowing when to fight and when to negotiate from positions of strength. The treaty that concluded the war preserved Nubian independence while establishing favorable terms for trade and territorial boundaries that lasted for generations, proving that smaller kingdoms could maintain sovereignty through skillful combination of military resistance and diplomatic engagement. The domestic policies that characterized Amanirenas' reign reflect her commitment to using the prosperity and security achieved through successful resistance to benefit all levels of Nubian society, rather than merely enriching royal circles and military elites. Archaeological evidence from her period reveals continued urban development, expanded educational opportunities, and cultural flowering that demonstrates how effective leadership can transform external challenges into opportunities for internal growth and social progress. The religious and cultural innovations that flourished under Amanirenas' patronage demonstrate her understanding that political authority requires spiritual legitimacy and cultural relevance that connect rulers to the deepest values and aspirations of their subjects. The temples, festivals, and artistic projects that she sponsored created environments where traditional Nubian beliefs could evolve and adapt while maintaining essential connections to ancestral wisdom and community identity. The international recognition that Amenirinas achieved during her lifetime reflects the respect that her diplomatic and military achievements earned throughout the ancient world, where news of successful resistance to Roman expansion inspired other peoples facing similar challenges while establishing Nubia as a significant regional power whose policies influenced broader patterns of international relations and cultural exchange. The legacy of infrastructure development that Amenirinas left for future generations includes not only military fortifications and commercial facilities, but also educational institutions, religious centers, and artistic workshops that preserved and transmitted Nubian cultural traditions while enabling ongoing adaptation to changing circumstances. These investments in human capital and cultural resources provided foundations for continued prosperity long after her death. The influence of Amenirinas' example on subsequent female rulers throughout Africa and beyond demonstrates how successful resistance to external domination can inspire others facing similar challenges while establishing precedents for female leadership that transcend cultural and geographical boundaries. Her reputation as both warrior and diplomat created models for political authority that emphasized service to community welfare rather than personal aggrandizement or territorial expansion. The archaeological discoveries that continue emerging from sites associated with Amenirinas' reign provide ongoing opportunities to refine understanding of her achievements while revealing aspects of Nubian civilization that demonstrate sophisticated approaches to governance, economics, and cultural development that offer alternatives to models based purely on military conquest and administrative control. As we contemplate the extraordinary life and achievements of this remarkable queen, we witness the power of principled leadership to transform challenges into opportunities while demonstrating that true strength often lies not in avoiding conflict, but in choosing battles carefully and fighting them with honor, intelligence, and unwavering commitment to values that transcend immediate political circumstances to serve lasting human welfare and dignity. The gentle evening breeze that flows along the ancient Nile continues carrying stories of a queen who proved that courage, wisdom, and determination could enable even small kingdoms to maintain independence and prosperity while contributing to broader human understanding of justice, leadership, and the eternal struggle between those who would dominate and those who choose to resist with honor and intelligence. As the gentle evening mist rises from the ancient gardens of Luoyang, we journey tonight into the extraordinary world of Wu Zetian, the only woman in Chinese history who dared to claim the title of emperor rather than accepting the lesser designation of empress, ruling the vast Tang Empire with intelligence and determination that transformed China during one of its most prosperous and culturally brilliant periods. Let your mind drift through the moonlit courtyards of her magnificent palaces, where a former concubine who entered the imperial harem as a teenager would rise through careful strategy and remarkable ability to become one of China's most effective rulers. Close your eyes and feel the quiet strength of a woman who proved that political genius and administrative excellence could overcome even the most deeply entrenched cultural prejudices when supported by unwavering determination and genuine care for her subjects' welfare. Picture yourself walking through the serene halls of the Daming Palace around 690 CE. where the soft light of silk lanterns illuminates painted scrolls depicting the flowering of arts and literature under Wu Zetian's enlightened patronage, while the gentle sound of court musicians practicing traditional melodies mingles with the whispered conversations of scholars and officials who have discovered that merit matters more than gender when rulers possess both vision and practical wisdom. This remarkable woman, who would reign for 15 years as emperor and exercise power for nearly half a century, demonstrated that effective governance required not force and intimidation but intelligence, patience, and the ability to inspire loyalty through policies that genuinely improved the lives of ordinary people. Born around 624 CE into a merchant family that had achieved wealth and status during the early Tang dynasty, the future empress entered the world during a period when Chinese civilization was experiencing unprecedented expansion and cultural confidence that would make the Tang era one of history's most brilliant periods of human achievement. Her father, Wu Zetian, had served the founding Tang emperors with distinction, providing his daughter with educational opportunities unusual for women of any social class while ensuring that she understood both the possibilities and limitations that governed female participation in Chinese political life. The path to imperial power began when the teenage Wu Zhao entered the harem of Emperor Taizong around 640 CE. Joining hundreds of other young women whose beauty and accomplishments had earned them places in the most prestigious court in the world. Rather than accepting the passive role typically expected of imperial concubines, Wu Zhao used her time in the harem to develop relationships with influential court officials while studying the complex administrative procedures that govern the vast Chinese empire, preparing herself for opportunities that she could sense but not yet fully envision. Watch as the death of Emperor Taizong in 649 CE creates the succession crisis that would transform Wu Zhao from imperial concubine to political power broker, as the traditional requirement that deceased emperors' consorts retire to Buddhist convents conflicted with her growing influence over the new Emperor Gaozong, who had fallen deeply in love with the intelligent and ambitious young woman. The decision to recall Wu Zhao from the convent and install her as Gaozong's concubine represented a break with established tradition that would prove to be only the first of many precedents she would shatter during her remarkable rise to supreme authority. The elimination of rivals that characterized Wu Zhao's consolidation of power within the imperial harem demonstrates both the ruthless determination necessary for survival in the dangerous world of court politics and her sophisticated understanding of how to manipulate existing institutions to achieve unprecedented goals. The mysterious deaths of consort Xiao and Empress Wang, who had initially supported Wu Zhao's elevation as a means of reducing each other's influence, cleared the path for her own appointment as empress while establishing her reputation as a formidable opponent who would not hesitate to destroy anyone who threatened her ambitions. The partnership between Wu Zetian and Emperor Gaozong that characterized the 660s and 670s reveals her gradual assumption of actual governmental authority as her husband's health declined and his dependence on her political acumen increased. Rather than wielding power from behind the scenes in traditional fashion, Wu Zetian insisted on formal recognition of her role in making policy decisions, commissioning documents, and receiving foreign diplomats in ways that prepared both the court and the broader Chinese political establishment for even more dramatic innovations to come. The regency period that followed Gaozong's death in 683 CE provided Wu Zetian with opportunities to demonstrate that her political skills extended far beyond court intrigue to encompass the complex challenges of governing an empire that stretched from Korea to Central Asia while maintaining the delicate balance of relationships with powerful neighbors, ambitious generals, and competing noble families whose cooperation was essential for political stability and effective administration. The revolutionary decision to claim the title of emperor in 690 CE, rather than continuing to rule through male figureheads, represents one of history's most audacious political innovations. As Wu Zetian broke with over a millennium of Chinese tradition while creating theological and legal justifications for female imperial authority that drew upon Buddhist concepts of spiritual merit and Confucian principles of virtuous governance. This unprecedented assumption of supreme political authority required careful preparation, widespread support from key officials, and the confidence that her administrative achievements had earned sufficient popular loyalty to survive the inevitable challenges from traditionalist opponents. The domestic policies that characterized Wu Zetian's reign as emperor demonstrate her understanding that lasting political authority required more than successful palace intrigue. It demanded genuine improvements in the lives of ordinary Chinese people through agricultural development, educational expansion, and administrative reforms that reduce corruption while increasing governmental efficiency. The examination systems that she strengthened and expanded created new opportunities for talented individuals to enter government service based on merit rather than family connections, while her infrastructure projects improved transportation and communication throughout the empire. The military successes that marked Wu Zetian's reign reflect her ability to select competent generals and provide them with the resources necessary for defending Chinese territories while expanding imperial influence into Central Asia and the Korean Peninsula. Rather than leading armies personally in the manner of traditional warrior emperors, she exercised military authority through careful strategic planning and diplomatic preparation that often achieved victory through negotiation and alliance building rather than costly battlefield confrontations. The cultural flowering that occurred during Wu Zetian's reign demonstrates her understanding that political legitimacy required not only effective administration but also patronage of arts, literature, and scholarship that would create lasting monuments to imperial achievements while providing employment for talented artists and intellectuals whose loyalty strengthened governmental stability. The poets, painters, and scholars who flourished under her patronage produced works that influenced Chinese culture for centuries while establishing artistic standards that reflected both traditional excellence and innovative creativity. The religious policies that Wu Zetian implemented throughout her reign reveal sophisticated understanding of how spiritual authority could support political power while accommodating the diverse religious traditions that characterized Chinese civilization. Her patronage of Buddhist temples and monasteries provided institutional support for educational and charitable activities while creating networks of religious leaders whose gratitude strengthened imperial authority, while her respect for Confucian traditions reassured conservative officials who might otherwise have opposed her unprecedented position. The international relations that characterized Wu Zetian's reign demonstrate her diplomatic skills and understanding of how military strength must be combined with cultural appeal and economic incentives to maintain Chinese influence throughout East Asia. The tributary relationships that she maintained with neighboring kingdoms provided security and prosperity while spreading Chinese cultural influences that enhanced imperial prestige and created stable foundations for long-term regional stability. The administrative innovations that Wu Zetian introduced into Chinese government reflected her practical understanding of how imperial authority must be exercised through competent officials whose loyalty depended on fair treatment, clear expectations, and genuine opportunities for advancement based on performance rather than favoritism. The bureaucratic reforms that she implemented improved governmental efficiency while reducing the corruption and nepotism that had weakened previous administrations. The succession arrangements that Wu Zetian eventually accepted represent perhaps her greatest long-term contribution to Chinese political stability, as her decision to restore the Tang dynasty rather than attempting to establish a permanent female imperial line demonstrated wisdom and restraint that ensured peaceful transition while preserving the governmental innovations and cultural achievements that had characterized her reign. This voluntary abdication of supreme power in favor of institutional continuity reflects understanding that true leadership sometimes requires sacrificing personal ambition for the greater good of society. The historical legacy of Wu Zetian's achievements extends far beyond her individual accomplishments to encompass fundamental changes in Chinese concepts of political authority, administrative competence, and cultural patronage that influenced governmental development for centuries while establishing precedents for female leadership that would inspire later generations of women who sought to participate in public life despite traditional restrictions and social prejudices. The contemporary relevance of Wu Zetian's example resonates with modern discussions about gender equality, political leadership, and the challenges faced by women who seek positions of authority in societies that maintain traditional assumptions about appropriate roles and capabilities. Her success in governing one of history's largest and most complex empires demonstrates that political excellence depends on intelligence, dedication, and genuine concern for public welfare rather than gender-based qualifications that reflect cultural prejudice rather than practical requirements for effective leadership. As we contemplate the extraordinary life and achievements of this remarkable woman, we witness the power of individual determination and exceptional ability to transform not only personal circumstances but entire civilizations, while demonstrating that the highest human accomplishments often emerge from those who possess the courage to challenge established limitations and the wisdom to use unprecedented opportunities for the benefit of others rather than merely personal aggrandizement. The gentle evening breeze that flows through the ancient Chinese gardens continues carrying whispers of an empress who proved that true imperial authority emerges not from inherited privilege or military conquest, but from the patient accumulation of wisdom, administrative skill, and genuine devotion to the welfare of those who trust their leaders to guide them toward prosperity, security, and cultural achievement that honors both individual potential and collective human dignity. As the gentle evening mist rises from the ancient landscapes of eastern Britain, we journey tonight into the world of Boudica, the fierce Celtic queen whose courage and determination sparked the greatest rebellion against Roman rule in British history, transforming a grieving widow into a legendary warrior whose fight for freedom would inspire generations across the centuries. Let your mind drift through the moonlit forests and rolling meadows of ancient Britain, where a remarkable woman united fractured tribes through the power of her voice and the justice of her cause, proving that even the mightiest empires must answer to those who refuse to surrender their dignity and independence. Close your eyes and feel the quiet strength of a leader who understood that some principles are worth any sacrifice, and that true immortality comes not from conquest but from the courage to stand for what is right. Picture yourself standing in a peaceful grove of ancient oaks around 60 CE, where the morning light filters through leaves that have witnessed the sacred ceremonies of Celtic druids for countless generations, while the distant sound of running water mingles with the songs of blackbirds welcoming another dawn over the lands of the Iceni tribe. This tranquil landscape, dotted with round houses and surrounded by carefully tended fields, represents the world that Boudica sought to protect, not just territory or political authority, but an entire way of life rooted in respect for nature, honor for ancestors, and the belief that freedom was humanity's birthright rather than a privilege to be granted by distant emperors. Born around 25 CE into the noble class of the Iceni, a proud Celtic tribe that controlled much of what is now Norfolk and Suffolk, Boudica entered a world where women could wield significant political and spiritual authority, serving as warriors, judges, and religious leaders in ways that shocked and sometimes appalled Roman observers who viewed such gender equality as evidence of barbarian chaos. Celtic society honored intelligence, courage, and wisdom regardless of whether these qualities appeared in male or female form, providing young Boudica with educational opportunities and social expectations that prepared her for the leadership role she would eventually embrace. The marriage that united Boudica with Prasutagus, king of the Iceni, represented more than romantic partnership. It was a political alliance that strengthened tribal unity while creating the foundations for resistance to Roman encroachment on Celtic independence and traditional ways of life. Prasutagus had achieved the delicate status of client king, maintaining nominal independence for his people while acknowledging Roman overlordship and paying tribute that purchased protection from other tribal enemies and freedom from direct Roman administration. Watch as the death of Prasutagus around 60 CE transforms Boudica from influential queen to desperate widow facing the complete destruction of everything she holds dear, as Roman officials ignore her husband's will and move to seize Iceni lands, wealth, and freedom in violation of agreements that had preserved tribal autonomy for nearly 2 decades. The Roman decision to treat the Iceni kingdom as conquered territory rather than honoring existing treaties reflects imperial arrogance and greed that would soon discover the terrible price of underestimating Celtic pride and a mother's fury. The personal humiliation that Boudica suffered at Roman hands, the public flogging that violated every concept of honor and dignity that governed Celtic society, and the assault on her daughters that struck at the heart of family sanctity represents more than individual tragedy. These deliberate insults were calculated demonstrations of Roman power designed to break Celtic resistance through shame and terror, but they instead ignited a flame of righteous anger that would consume Roman towns and legions across eastern Britain. The call to rebellion that echoed through the forests and villages of Celtic Britain carried Boudicca's voice to tribes that had feuded among themselves for generations, as her eloquence and moral authority transcended traditional divisions to create unity based on shared outrage at Roman injustice and common determination to preserve Celtic civilization from foreign domination. The coalition that formed around her leadership included not only her own Iceni, but also the powerful Trinovantes and other tribes whose grievances against Roman rule had festered for years without effective leadership or coordination. The first target of Boudicca's rebellion was Camulodunum, modern Colchester, which had been transformed from tribal capital into Roman colonial town, complete with temples honoring emperors as gods and veteran settlements that displaced Celtic families from ancestral lands. The destruction of this symbol of Roman power demonstrated that organized resistance could achieve victories that seemed impossible when tribes fought alone, while the complete elimination of Roman civilians sent unmistakable messages about the stakes involved in the struggle for British independence. The tactical brilliance that characterized Boudicca's military campaigns reveals her understanding that Celtic advantages in mobility, local knowledge, and popular support could overcome Roman superiority in equipment and discipline when properly coordinated through surprise attacks and strategic targeting of vulnerable positions. Her forces moved with speed that confounded Roman commanders while avoiding pitched battles that would favor heavily armored legions fighting in disciplined formations. The sack of Londinium, modern London, represents perhaps the most devastating blow that Boudicca's rebellion inflicted on Roman authority, as the destruction of this crucial commercial center disrupted trade networks and demonstrated that no Roman settlement was safe from Celtic vengeance. Archaeological evidence reveals the thoroughness of this destruction, with layers of burned debris and scattered artifacts telling silent stories of a city consumed by fire and fury that left Roman confidence in tatters. The momentum that carried Boudicca's forces from victory to victory throughout the summer of 60 CE reflects not merely military success, but the unleashing of long-suppressed frustrations with Roman taxation, land seizures, cultural suppression, and religious persecution that had made life increasingly unbearable for Celtic communities throughout southeastern Britain. Each triumph brought new recruits and additional grievances that fed the growing flames of rebellion. The spiritual dimensions of Boudicca's leadership drew upon Celtic religious traditions that viewed warfare as sacred activity when conducted in defense of homeland and family, while her prophetic abilities and connection to divine forces provided psychological advantages that inspired her followers and intimidated her enemies. The Druids who supported her cause brought not only tactical advice but also religious authority that legitimized rebellion as divinely sanctioned response to Roman sacrilege and oppression. The Roman response to Boudicca's victories demonstrates the seriousness with which imperial authorities viewed this threat to their British conquests. as Governor Suetonius Paulinus abandoned his campaign against the Druids of Anglesey to concentrate all available forces against the Celtic rebellion. The recall of troops from distant frontiers and the frantic preparations for decisive battle reveal Roman recognition that failure to crush this uprising could inspire similar revolts throughout the empire. The final confrontation between Boudicca's tribal army and Roman legions took place somewhere in the English Midlands, where superior Celtic numbers faced Roman discipline, armour, and tactical experience in a battle that would determine the future of Britain for centuries to come. The exact location remains unknown, but archaeological evidence and historical accounts combine to paint pictures of desperate fighting where individual courage confronted organized military machinery. The defeat of Boudicca's forces in this climactic battle resulted not from lack of courage or commitment but from tactical disadvantages that Celtic warfare had not yet overcome, as tribal enthusiasm and individual heroism proved insufficient against Roman formations that had been perfected through centuries of conquest and professional military development. The slaughter that followed demonstrates Roman determination to ensure that British resistance would never again threaten imperial authority. The mysterious circumstances surrounding Boudicca's death, whether by poison to avoid capture, from wounds sustained in battle, or from illness brought on by grief and exhaustion, add poignant mystery to her story while ensuring that her final moments remain subjects for speculation rather than definitive historical record. Her refusal to surrender and determination to die free rather than live in bondage epitomize Celtic values that prioritized honor over survival. The brutal Roman repression that followed the rebellion's defeat included systematic devastation of tribal territories, mass executions, and the near extinction of Iceni tribal identity through policies designed to eliminate forever the possibility of organized resistance to imperial rule. Yet these very excesses created martyrdom that would inspire future generations of freedom fighters who found in Boudicca's example proof that resistance to tyranny was both possible and noble. The gradual Romanization of Britain that followed Boudicca's defeat represents both the success of imperial policy and the failure of assimilation to completely eliminate Celtic cultural identity, as elements of British resistance to foreign domination persisted throughout the Roman period and beyond. The memory of the Queen who had dared to challenge Rome became part of British cultural DNA that would resurface whenever external powers sought to impose unwelcome authority. The rediscovery of Boudicca's story during later periods of British history, particularly during the Renaissance and Victorian era, demonstrates how each generation finds in her example reflections of their own struggles against oppression and inspiration for resistance to injustice. Her transformation from historical figure to cultural icon illustrates the power of individual courage to transcend specific circumstances and speak to universal human aspirations for freedom and dignity. The archaeological evidence that continues emerging from sites associated with Boudicca's rebellion provides ongoing opportunities to refine understanding of Celtic society, Roman imperial policies, and the complex interactions between conquest and resistance that characterized ancient Britain. Each discovery adds new details to stories that illuminate both specific historical events and broader patterns of cultural conflict and adaptation. The feminist interpretations of Boudica's legacy emphasize her significance as an early example of female leadership in warfare and politics, while her defense of family and community against sexual violence resonates with contemporary movements seeking justice for similar crimes. Her story demonstrates that women's anger and determination can fuel revolutionary change when channeled through effective organization and moral authority. As we contemplate the extraordinary courage and tragic fate of this remarkable woman, we witness the eternal conflict between power and justice, between imperial ambition and human dignity, that continues shaping our world today. Boudica's rebellion reminds us that some values transcend practical calculations of success and failure, and that the willingness to fight for principles often matters more than victory or defeat in determining how history remembers those who choose to stand against injustice. The gentle winds that blow across the ancient British landscapes continue carrying whispers of a queen who proved that true strength emerges not from weapons or armies but from unwavering commitment to protecting those we love and preserving the freedoms that make life worth living, even when the odds seem impossible and the cost appears unbearable. As the gentle moonlight filters through the ancient columns of forgotten palaces where remarkable queens once held court, we step tonight into the sophisticated world of female political artistry. The subtle techniques and diplomatic mastery that enabled women to wield genuine authority in civilizations that officially denied them power. Let your mind drift through the quiet chambers where these extraordinary rulers perfected the delicate arts of negotiation, alliance building, and cultural influence that often proved more effective than armies or decrees in achieving lasting political goals. Close your eyes and feel the patient wisdom of women who understood that true power flows not from commands but from the ability to inspire loyalty, create consensus, and transform opponents into allies through the gentle art of persuasion combined with unwavering strength of character. Picture yourself walking through the moonlit gardens of an ancient palace, where the soft sound of fountains mingles with the whispered conversations of diplomats and advisors who have discovered that the queens they serve possess political skills that transcend traditional concepts of rulership. These remarkable women have learned that governing effectively requires not just authority but also the ability to listen carefully, speak persuasively, and create environments where even the most challenging negotiations can reach mutually beneficial conclusions. The diplomatic techniques pioneered by history's greatest queens reveal approaches to international relations that emphasized sustainable partnerships over temporary victories, mutual benefit over domination, and cultural exchange over military conquest. Hatshepsut's successful trade expeditions to Punt demonstrated how peaceful commercial relationships could achieve more lasting prosperity than military campaigns, while creating diplomatic precedents that influenced Egyptian foreign policy for generations. Her emphasis on gift exchange, ceremonial recognition, and cultural respect established models for international engagement that honored both Egyptian interests and foreign dignity. Watch as Queen Nefertiti's involvement in revolutionary religious diplomacy reveals how spiritual innovation could serve political purposes, as her support for monotheistic Atenism created opportunities for reshaping both domestic governance and international relationships around shared theological principles. The diplomatic correspondence from Amarna demonstrates sophisticated understanding of how religious reforms required careful negotiation with foreign allies who needed reassurance that theological changes would not affect existing treaties and commercial agreements. The marriage alliances that characterized ancient queenly diplomacy represent perhaps the most complex and skillful aspect of female political artistry, as these unions required balancing personal relationships with strategic objectives while navigating the intricate protocols that governed interactions between royal houses. Wu Zetian's careful cultivation of relationships within the Tang imperial family enabled her gradual ascent from concubine to empress to emperor through a series of strategic partnerships that demonstrated her understanding of how personal loyalty could be transformed into political authority when combined with exceptional administrative competence. The cultural patronage that many forgotten queens employed as tools of statecraft reveals their understanding that lasting influence often emerges from artistic and intellectual achievements that outlive political circumstances. Zenobia's transformation of Palmyra into a cosmopolitan center of learning created soft power that enhanced her military conquests while establishing cultural foundations for her political authority that impressed both subjects and foreign diplomats. Her court's attraction to scholars, poets, and philosophers from throughout the known world demonstrated how intellectual patronage could serve diplomatic purposes while creating environments that fostered innovation and cross-cultural understanding. The religious leadership that several ancient queens exercised demonstrates their recognition that spiritual authority could provide alternative foundations for political power, particularly in societies where traditional masculine models of rulership emphasized military prowess over other forms of competence. Hatshepsut's careful cultivation of relationships with Egyptian priesthoods enabled her to maintain religious legitimacy while introducing innovations that supported her unprecedented position as female pharaoh. Her commissioning of temples and religious ceremonies created sacred spaces where her authority could be celebrated and reinforced through spiritual rather than merely political means. The economic strategies that characterized successful female rulership reveal understanding that sustainable political authority requires attention to commercial development, agricultural productivity, and trade relationships that generate prosperity for subjects while providing resources necessary for governmental operations. Amanirena's defense of Nubian trade routes demonstrated how economic interests could justify military action while creating diplomatic opportunities for negotiating favorable peace terms that preserved both territorial integrity and commercial advantages. The educational initiatives that many forgotten queens promoted reflect their appreciation for how knowledge and cultural development could strengthen political institutions while creating human capital that enhanced governmental effectiveness. Wu Zetian's expansion of examination systems and support for educational institutions created new pathways for talented individuals to enter government service while establishing precedents for merit-based advancement that benefited both imperial administration and social mobility. The artistic commissions that adorned ancient queens' palaces and temples served multiple political functions, creating visual representations of royal authority while providing employment for skilled craftsmen whose Loyalty strengthened political stability. The sophisticated iconography that decorated Hatshepsut's mortuary temple communicates messages about divine approval and political legitimacy, while demonstrating artistic patronage that enhanced Egypt's cultural prestige throughout the ancient world. The family dynamics that many ancient queens navigated with exceptional skill reveal their understanding that political authority often depends on managing complex personal relationships while maintaining institutional stability across generational transitions. Nefertiti's apparent success in preparing her daughters for potential royal responsibilities demonstrates long-term thinking about dynastic continuity, while her partnership with Akhenaten shows how spousal collaboration could multiply political effectiveness when both partners possessed complementary skills and shared vision. The intelligence networks that successful queens developed and maintained enabled them to make informed decisions while anticipating challenges that could threaten their authority or their kingdom's security. These informal systems of communication and information gathering often proved more effective than formal governmental intelligence services because they relied on personal relationships and voluntary cooperation rather than coercion or payment. The trust that these networks required demonstrates the exceptional interpersonal skills that characterized the most successful female rulers. The conflict resolution techniques that ancient queens employed in managing both domestic disputes and international tensions reveal their understanding that sustainable solutions often emerge from patient negotiation and creative compromise rather than decisive victory that creates lasting resentment. Zenobia's initial success in expanding Palmyrene territory without completely alienating Roman authority demonstrates diplomatic skills that enabled territorial growth while avoiding premature confrontation with superior military forces. The ceremonial innovations that many forgotten queens introduced into court protocols served important political functions, creating new traditions that honored their unprecedented positions while maintaining continuity with established customs that legitimized their authority. These careful balances between innovation and tradition required sophisticated understanding of cultural psychology and political symbolism that enabled female rulers to claim new forms of authority without completely disrupting existing institutional frameworks. The mentorship relationships that successful queens developed with younger women, court officials, and foreign diplomats created networks of loyalty and expertise that strengthened their political positions while preparing future leaders who could continue their policies and protect their legacies. These informal educational systems often proved more effective than formal training programs because they were based on personal relationships and shared experiences rather than abstract instruction. The legacy management strategies that characterized the most successful forgotten queens reveal their understanding that lasting political achievement requires attention to how posterity will remember and interpret their accomplishments. The careful documentation of achievements through artistic representations, architectural monuments, and written records demonstrates forward thinking about historical reputation combined with immediate attention to governmental effectiveness. The adaptation techniques that enabled ancient queens to maintain authority despite changing circumstances demonstrate remarkable flexibility and resilience that allowed them to transform challenges into opportunities while preserving core principles and objectives. Boudica's ability to unite traditionally hostile Celtic tribes around shared grievances against Roman oppression illustrates how effective leadership can create unity from diversity when motivated by compelling vision and authentic commitment to collective welfare. As we contemplate these sophisticated arts of queenly power, we witness alternatives to traditional masculine models of political authority that emphasized different values and employed different methods while achieving remarkable success in governing diverse populations across vast territories and extended time periods. These forgotten queens demonstrate that effective leadership emerges from intelligence, empathy, and commitment to others' welfare rather than from physical dominance or inherited privilege alone. The gentle techniques of influence and persuasion that characterize their approaches to governance offer timeless lessons about human nature and political effectiveness that remain relevant to contemporary challenges requiring collaborative solutions, cross-cultural understanding, and sustainable approaches to authority that honor both individual dignity and collective needs. Their examples remind us that the highest achievements in human governance often emerge from those who understand that true power lies not in the ability to compel obedience, but in the capacity to inspire voluntary cooperation toward shared goals that benefit everyone involved. As the gentle evening shadows lengthen across the defaced monuments where once proud queens gazed eternally over their domains, we step tonight into the somber mystery of historical erasure. The deliberate, systematic campaign to eliminate the memory of powerful women whose very existence challenged fundamental assumptions about gender, authority, and the natural order of leadership. Let your mind drift through the quiet ruins where chiseled scars mark empty spaces where royal cartouches once proclaimed female names, while shattered statues bear witness to the determined efforts of later generations to rewrite history according to their preferred narratives. Close your eyes and feel the profound sadness of voices silenced not by death but by the calculated destruction of evidence that these remarkable women had ever wielded power at all. Picture yourself standing before the damaged walls of Hatshepsut's mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, where morning light reveals the systematic destruction that transformed one of Egypt's most successful pharaohs into a historical phantom whose very name was hacked from stone with malicious precision. The chiseled scars that mark every surface tell stories not of natural decay or accidental damage, but of deliberate, methodical erasure that required years of concentrated effort and considerable expense to complete. This was not vandalism but political editing on an architectural scale, designed to convince future generations that Egypt's 22 years of unprecedented prosperity had somehow occurred without female leadership. The psychological motivations that drove such comprehensive historical revision reflect deep anxieties about the implications of successful female rule for societies built upon assumptions of masculine superiority and patriarchal inheritance. The very existence of queens who had governed effectively challenged fundamental beliefs about natural hierarchies and divine order that justified male dominance in political, religious, and social spheres. Rather than acknowledging these inconvenient examples of feminine competence, later rulers chose the more radical solution of pretending they had never existed at all. Watchers Thutmose III, Hatshepsut's stepson and eventual successor, orchestrates perhaps history's most thorough campaign of official forgetting, employing teams of stonemasons to methodically eliminate every trace of his stepmother's reign from temples, tombs, and public monuments throughout Egypt. This massive undertaking required not only physical destruction but also the rewriting of official chronicles, the alteration of artistic representations, and the careful coaching of priests and scribes who would be responsible for transmitting historical knowledge to future generations. The scope and thoroughness of this erasure campaign demonstrates both the resources available to pharaonic authority and the perceived threat that Hatshepsut's example posed to traditional concepts of kingship. The religious justifications that sanctioned these erasure campaigns drew upon theological concepts that viewed female rule as violations of cosmic order requiring correction through human intervention. The ancient Egyptian concept of Mat, divine truth and harmony, was interpreted to exclude feminine authority from the sphere of pharaonic power, making Hatshepsut's reign not merely unusual but spiritually dangerous. Her elimination from historical records was therefore presented as religious duty rather than political expedience, enabling those who participated in her erasure to view their actions as pious rather than vindictive. The pattern of feminine erasure that characterized Hatshepsut's fate was repeated throughout the ancient world wherever women had achieved positions of authority that conflicted with cultural expectations about appropriate gender roles. Zenobia's challenge to Roman supremacy resulted not only in military defeat, but in systematic efforts to minimize her achievements while transforming her into a cautionary tale about the dangers of feminine ambition. Roman historians deliberately emphasized her exotic otherness and alleged sexual improprieties rather than acknowledging the political and military skills that had enabled her to build an empire stretching from Turkey to Egypt. The historiographical techniques that ancient chroniclers employed to diminish female achievements reveal sophisticated understanding of how memory could be manipulated through selective emphasis and strategic omission. Rather than denying that powerful women had existed, male historians chose to interpret their successes as evidence of masculine influence operating behind the scenes, as manipulative sexuality that corrupted male judgment, or as temporary aberrations that proved rather than challenged the natural supremacy of masculine leadership. These narrative strategies enabled patriarchal societies to acknowledge historical facts while simultaneously neutralizing their subversive implications. The destruction of written records that documented female achievements was often more complete and effective than the defacement of monuments, as papyrus and parchment could be burned without leaving visible scars while stone required conspicuous and expensive alteration. The systematic elimination of court archives, diplomatic correspondence, and administrative documents that would have provided detailed evidence of Queen's governmental competence ensured that later historians would lack the source materials necessary to reconstruct accurate accounts of feminine rule even when they possessed the inclination to do so. Yet the archaeological discoveries of the past century have gradually revealed the inadequacy of these ancient erasure campaigns as scientific. Excavation techniques and advanced analytical methods enable modern scholars to recover evidence that deliberate destruction failed to eliminate entirely. The patient work of archaeologists using ground-penetrating radar, chemical analysis, and digital reconstruction has restored names, faces, and achievements to queens whose stories seemed permanently lost to human memory. These technological resurrections demonstrate how material evidence can sometimes prove more durable than written records in preserving uncomfortable truths about the past. The political motivations that drove feminine erasure often reflected broader struggles over succession, legitimacy, and dynastic authority that used gender as convenient justification for what were essentially power disputes between competing claimants to royal authority. Wu Zetian's unprecedented assumption of the Chinese imperial title created precedent that threatened traditional concepts of mandate of heaven and Confucian social order, making her elimination from official histories a matter of political necessity rather than mere misogyny. The subsequent Tang dynasty's decision to minimize or distort accounts of her reign reflected understanding that acknowledging successful female emperorship could encourage similar challenges to masculine monopoly on supreme authority. The religious establishments that collaborated in feminine erasure often possessed their own institutional interests in maintaining theological systems that excluded women from positions of spiritual authority. The Egyptian priesthoods that supported Hatshepsut's elimination understood that acknowledging legitimate feminine pharaonic authority could establish precedents for female religious leadership that would threaten their own masculine hierarchies. Similarly, the Chinese bureaucratic classes that participated in Wu Zetian's historical diminishment recognized that celebrating her administrative innovations might encourage examination of their own assumptions about gender-based qualifications for governmental service. The cultural transmission mechanisms that perpetuated feminine erasure operated through educational systems, artistic traditions, and popular storytelling that gradually transformed historical queens into mythical figures whose supernatural qualities removed them from the realm of practical political example. Boudica's transformation from historical military commander into legendary Celtic warrior goddess enabled later generations to admire her courage while dismissing her political relevance, as divine or semi-divine status placed her achievements beyond the reach of ordinary human emulation. The economic dimensions of feminine erasure included the systematic removal of women from commercial records, trade agreements, and property documents that would have demonstrated their participation in economic activities traditionally viewed as masculine domains. The elimination of evidence showing queens as successful military commanders, diplomatic negotiators, and commercial entrepreneurs served to reinforce cultural assumptions about natural feminine incompetence in these crucial areas of governance and social leadership. The international aspects of feminine erasure involved diplomatic correspondence and treaty negotiations that deliberately minimized or ignored the roles that queens had played in achieving important agreements between kingdoms and empires. The transformation of joint negotiations into accounts of purely masculine diplomacy served the interests of male rulers who preferred not to acknowledge that their female counterparts had sometimes proved more skilled in achieving mutually beneficial solutions to complex international disputes. The artistic dimensions of erasure involved not only the destruction of existing portraits and sculptures, but also the creation of new artworks that reimagined historical events without feminine participation. The systematic replacement of accurate historical representations with revised versions that excluded or minimized women's roles created visual narratives that supported textual accounts of purely masculine achievement while eliminating evidence of the collaborative or feminine leadership that had actually characterized many important historical developments. The recovery of feminine histories through modern archaeological and scholarly techniques has revealed not only individual queens whose stories were suppressed but also broader patterns of female participation in ancient political, economic, and cultural life that traditional histories had either ignored or systematically minimized. These rediscoveries demonstrate how contemporary assumptions about historical gender roles may reflect the success of ancient erasure campaigns rather than accurate understanding of how ancient societies actually functioned. The continuing relevance of understanding feminine erasure extends beyond academic historical interest to encompass contemporary discussions about institutional memory, gender equality, and the processes through which certain voices and perspectives become marginalized or eliminated from public discourse. The techniques that ancient societies developed for minimizing inconvenient female achievements provide templates that can be recognized and resisted when similar patterns emerge in modern institutional and cultural contexts. As we contemplate this centuries-long campaign to eliminate powerful women from historical memory, we witness both the fragility and the resilience of human achievement. Recognizing how political motivations can temporarily obscure even the most remarkable accomplishments, while acknowledging that truth possesses stubborn durability that eventually resurfaces despite determined efforts at suppression. These forgotten queens remind us that every generation must actively choose whether to preserve or eliminate the full complexity of human experience, and that the recovery of silenced voices requires patient work and courageous commitment to acknowledging uncomfortable truths about power, gender, and historical memory. The gentle moonlight that illuminates the damaged monuments of these erased queens continues to bear witness to the eternal struggle between those who would control historical narrative and those who seek to preserve complete and accurate records of human achievement. Their restored stories demonstrate that while political authority may be temporary, the impact of wise and compassionate leadership transcends the limitations that any generation attempts to impose upon human memory and recognition. As the gentle evening stars begin their eternal watch over the ruins of ancient palaces where remarkable women once governed with wisdom and grace, we arrive tonight at the peaceful conclusion of our journey through the hidden histories of history's most extraordinary female rulers. Let your mind drift through the moonlit corridors of memory, where the whispered stories of forgotten queens continue echoing across the vast expanses of time, carrying lessons about leadership, courage, and human dignity that transcend the boundaries of culture, era, and circumstance. Close your eyes and feel the quiet presence of these remarkable women, whose rediscovered voices remind us that true power emerges not from domination but from the patient art of serving others while building legacies that honor the highest possibilities of human achievement and compassion. Picture yourself walking through a serene garden where monuments to these lost queens have been lovingly restored. Their carved faces once again gazing with dignity across landscapes that remember their wisdom, while flowering vines and ancient trees create peaceful sanctuaries where contemporary visitors can contemplate the timeless relevance of stories that were nearly lost forever. The archaeological discoveries and scholarly investigations that have gradually returned these women to historical visibility represent more than mere academic achievement. They constitute acts of justice that restore balance to human memory while expanding our understanding of what leadership has meant and could mean again. The contemporary significance of these rediscovered queens extends far beyond historical curiosity to encompass fundamental questions about power, representation, and the stories that societies choose to remember or forget. Each restored name and recovered achievement challenges assumptions about the past while offering alternative models for organizing human communities around principles of inclusion, wisdom, and collaborative strength rather than hierarchical dominance and competitive struggle. These women demonstrate that effective governance has always been possible regardless of gender when individual capability combines with genuine commitment to collective welfare. The archaeological methodologies that have enabled the recovery of lost queens reveal how material evidence can sometimes preserve truths that written records attempted to suppress, as patient excavation uncovers statues, inscriptions, and artifacts that bear witness to female achievements despite systematic campaigns to eliminate such evidence from historical memory. The techniques developed for reading damaged hieroglyphs, reconstructing defaced monuments, and interpreting fragmentary sources provide models for recovering other silenced voices while demonstrating how contemporary technology can serve historical justice through careful, respectful investigation. Watch as the pattern of feminine erasure that characterized ancient attempts to eliminate successful female rulers finds disturbing parallels in contemporary struggles over whose achievements deserve recognition and whose contributions merit remembrance in educational curricula, public monuments, and cultural narratives. The deliberate destruction of Hatshepsut's cartouches, the systematic minimization of Zenobia's achievements, and the transformation of Boudica from historical commander into mythical figure demonstrate techniques for marginalizing inconvenient examples that remain relevant to understanding how exclusion operates in modern institutional and cultural contexts. The diplomatic innovations pioneered by forgotten queens offer timeless lessons about conflict resolution, international relations, and the cultivation of sustainable partnerships that honor diverse interests while achieving mutually beneficial outcomes. Hatshepsut's peaceful trade expeditions, Nefertiti's involvement in religious diplomacy, and Wu Zetian's administrative reforms demonstrate approaches to authority that emphasize negotiation over coercion, cultural exchange over conquest, and long-term stability over temporary advantage. Principles that remain essential for addressing contemporary global challenges requiring international cooperation and cross-cultural understanding. The economic policies implemented by ancient queens frequently emphasized sustainable development, infrastructure investment, and the creation of prosperity that benefited broad populations rather than merely enriching ruling elites. These approaches to governance recognize that lasting political authority emerges from genuine improvements in subjects' lives rather than from fear or intimidation, while understanding that cultural achievements and educational investments often provide more enduring foundations for societal strength than military conquests or territorial expansion. The cultural patronage that characterized many forgotten queens reflects their understanding that artistic and intellectual achievements create soft power that transcends political boundaries while inspiring loyalty through beauty and meaning rather than mere obligation. Zenobia's transformation of Palmyra into a cosmopolitan center of learning, Wu Zetian's support for poetry and scholarship, and various queens' commissioning of magnificent architecture demonstrate how investment in human creativity and cultural development strengthens societies while creating legacies that outlast temporary political circumstances. The religious leadership that several ancient queens exercised challenges assumptions about spiritual authority while demonstrating how alternative approaches to sacred power can serve inclusive purposes rather than hierarchical control. The theological innovations that supported Hatshepsut's pharaonic authority, Nefertiti's involvement in monotheistic reforms, and various queens' roles in establishing festivals and ceremonies that celebrated life and community rather than war and dominance suggest possibilities for spiritual leadership that emphasizes healing and harmony rather than submission and fear. The family dynamics that many forgotten queens navigated with exceptional skill reveal their understanding that personal relationships often determine political outcomes, while their attention to education and succession planning demonstrates long-term thinking about institutional continuity that transcends individual ambition. The partnerships between Nefertiti and Akhenaten, the mentoring relationships that Wu Zetian developed with younger officials, and the coalition building that enabled Boudica to unite traditionally hostile tribes illustrate how effective leadership often emerges from collaborative rather than authoritarian approaches to authority. The influence of rediscovered queens on contemporary discussions about leadership, representation, and historical memory extends beyond academic scholarship to encompass popular culture, educational policy, and institutional reform efforts seeking to create more inclusive approaches to recognizing human achievement and potential. Museums, documentaries, and educational programs that feature these remarkable women help contemporary audiences understand that gender-based exclusion from leadership represents cultural choice rather than natural necessity, while inspiring individuals who have been marginalized by traditional power structures. The international recognition that several ancient queens achieved during their lifetimes demonstrates that cross-cultural respect for exceptional leadership has always been possible when individual achievements transcend conventional expectations and cultural prejudices. The diplomatic correspondence that documents foreign rulers' acknowledgement of queens' authority, the trade relationships that flourished under female governance, and the cultural exchanges that characterized their reigns reveal networks of international cooperation that honor ability and accomplishment regardless of gender or cultural origin. The ongoing archaeological discoveries that continue revealing new evidence about forgotten queens ensure that their stories will keep evolving as Improved techniques and expanded investigations yield additional insights into their achievements and the societies they governed. Ground-penetrating radar, chemical analysis, and digital reconstruction technologies enable scholars to recover information that previous generations of researchers could not access, while international collaborations bring diverse perspectives and expertise to questions that require interdisciplinary approaches and cross-cultural understanding. The educational implications of recovering lost queens extend throughout curriculum development, teacher training, and pedagogical approaches that seek to provide students with comprehensive understanding of human potential and historical achievement. The integration of these women's stories into world history courses, leadership studies, and cultural analysis programs helps prepare future generations to recognize and value diverse forms of excellence while understanding how systematic exclusion impoverishes collective knowledge and limits individual possibilities. The inspiration that contemporary leaders find in forgotten queens' examples demonstrates the continuing relevance of their approaches to governance, diplomacy, and cultural development for addressing modern challenges requiring innovative solutions and collaborative leadership. Political figures, business executives, and community organizers who study these women's methods often discover techniques for building consensus, managing diverse constituencies, and achieving sustainable results that remain effective across different contexts and circumstances. As we reflect on the remarkable journeys of these forgotten queens, we witness the power of patient scholarship and technological innovation to restore voices that seemed permanently silenced while demonstrating that truth possesses enduring strength that eventually overcomes even systematic campaigns of suppression and erasure. Their recovered stories remind us that every generation faces choices about whose achievements to remember and whose contributions to honor, while their examples provide alternative models for leadership that emphasize service, wisdom, and collaborative strength rather than dominance and competition. The gentle evening breeze that flows across the ancient landscapes where these remarkable women once governed carries continuing invitations to expand our understanding of human possibility while recognizing that effective leadership has always emerged from individuals who possess the courage to serve others, the wisdom to build rather than destroy, and the vision to create institutions and cultural achievements that honor the highest aspirations of human communities seeking justice, beauty, and lasting peace. The timeless presence of these forgotten queens continues illuminating pathways toward more inclusive, compassionate, and effective approaches to authority that recognize leadership as stewardship rather than privilege, power as responsibility rather than advantage, and achievement as collective rather than individual accomplishment. Their whispered wisdom reminds us that the greatest legacies emerge from those who understand that true immortality lies not in monuments to personal glory, but in contributions to human flourishing that enable future generations to build upon foundations of justice, knowledge, and cultural beauty that transcend the limitations of any single lifetime or historical period.